All right, welcome everybody. This is the first BS podcast, Blacksmith Integrations podcast here. We're going to be talking about lots of tech stuff, fun stuff, gaming, new technology that comes out, old technology, stuff that may or may not die. Will the AS400 ever go away? Probably not.
Never. It'll never go away. Not if I have anything to say about it.
So, does anybody even know what an AS400 out there is? That's going to be one of those big questions. But in any case, we're going to get started here, and how we're going to go over there. Man, what was your day like today?
Long.
Long.
Day ends and why it's probably always going to be long. What about you?
It's been good. Been listening to one of my favorite podcasts, All In Podcast. It's a great one. If you haven't listened to it, you should go listen to it. It's basically a bunch of tech billionaires, and they give you a lot of great inside information with what's going on, including the whole Sam Altman going over to Congress talking about AI. So, did you watch that at all with any of the stuff?
I watched part of it and it got me super frustrated to act for him to sit there and talk about wanting to license, like requiring a license to even use AI tech or develop it. The
So,
whole, I mean, it just seems ridiculous to me.
so
And
my
from the company that's
yeah.
doing the
Well, you know
development
what it
and
is.
gatekeeping.
I agree. So I was okay. I picked this up from All In, but I mean I agree. It sounds like he's super positioning himself to be the guy that they call to basically gatekeep himself, building a moat around himself to be able to gatekeep it, so he can be the one that's always ahead of the game.
Yep.
That's what it honestly sounds like to me. But
Yep. I mean, OpenAI is arguably one of the largest currently developed AI platforms that's available for consumer use and even
yeah,
a lot of commercial use. They're definitely not the only one, but they're certainly one of the biggest.
yeah.
And I don't know. I'm really concerned that this guy is the guy and OpenAI is the company that's kind of trying to drive regulation on that because they've already done the work. They want to write regulations within the bounds they currently operate and just keep people out of the marketplace and just have everyone license their tech forward. And while they have a unique LLM, it's not necessarily in the consumer or humanity's best interest to have one person control everything. It's
Yeah.
similar to the way the Google monopoly works.
Yeah.
What Google is in, nobody can compete in, period, because they just buy and shelve whatever they don't want people to have.
You talking about
And my
Ash
concern is
Jeeves isn't the main GoDaddy any or the Google?
it's not, it would be nice if it were, or even hell, Yahoo, Metacrawler, any
Yahoo.
of the rest of them that used to exist that are
Oh
gone.
my
Even the
god.
browser wars, Chrome powers 90% of the web, well, 87% of the web.
Ye-
And there's really no way around. Even Microsoft had to succumb to it and make
Yeah.
Edge based on Chromium.
Yeah. So did you ever watch Parks and Rec?
Oh yeah,
So do you ever see the scene where in there where he's like, all right, Google that, and they're like, what's Google? And they end up finding out like, why does this whole town use Alta Vista?
I like the way Ron Swanson realizes that Google Maps is a picture of his house.
Yeah.
He grabs the whole computer and just
That's
chucks it in the freaking dumpster. He just loses his mind over it. Like,
funny.
you mean to tell me they have pictures of me? Like, yeah, buddy, they do.
Oh yeah, that was funny. But yeah, I don't know, man. This whole AI revolution, language models and everything else. I think so. The biggest argument that I see, like, okay, I was talking to my buddy. He's a showrunner, show producer. He's working for a large venue as a stage manager, not a venue, but a large production company as a stage manager. And he is touring. He's going to be touring around the world with huge like names. He's a stage manager of a show coming SoFi in a couple of weeks, and they sold that place out. He literally is arguing with me for I don't know an hour. Well, more him one sided argument. How he's like, man, this is taking our jobs. I hate it. And it's funny because he's arguing with his mom, who is like the number one salesperson for this real estate insurance company or whatever in the entire United States. She's like, "Oh, I love it to death. It's an assistant tool." But I
Yeah.
mean, what are your thoughts on? Is this a tool? Is it going to replace jobs? What is it like for you?
I think it's going to augment jobs. It will replace some things because automation replaces, by its very nature, automation replaces the human factor of a task. There's
Yeah,
just no way around that. But I don't necessarily think it's going to be killing people's jobs in the creative space because the output that it produces is incredibly formulaic. That
yeah,
the whole thing about what happens when you train one of these models to do something is that it hones in on the things you think are good and amplifies them, just like real people. Just the same
Yeah.
way, Twitter becomes amplified, or Instagram. Like you see, like one person makes one viral thing and 50 copycats show up. We have the same inherent issue with real quality coming out of AI. Is the minute you train something that seems like it might be, pervasive or persuasive in some way, all the model goes to say this is the best thing. So it's an immediate feedback loop, and I don't see how it's gonna be super creative. Even the AI art projects and AI art applications, they're just amalgamations of all the data they've been fed, and all they're doing is spitting it back out rapidly and making things that look like the things that got positive reinforcement from. So, is it being creative? I don't know, because we don't realistically have the ability to train them in a way. There's no fuzzy math for the most part outside like
Yeah.
quantum computing and certain like hardware based edge cases. So I'm not super certain that it's going to produce the coming apocalypse of human jobs
Yeah.
as far as the creative space goes and developers and stuff. The code that like OpenAI or ChatGPT produces is pretty poor. It
Yeah.
makes a decent starting point, but it's definitely not something you just chuck into a compiler and run with. At least I would not. And we've practiced with it. We've messed with it to see what kind of output it has, and it's just not there yet. Give it 5 years, maybe. It's
Yeah.
good for automated patch management, though.
Yeah.
That
Oh, I
that is
mean,
actually something that's pretty good with.
well, I have two thoughts there. One from obviously an automation process and workflow. Is this similar to what happened in the 1920s with the assembly line? And with automation and everything else, it took people's jobs, but is it replaced by the people working on the machines that basically took their jobs? They always, I always tell people, I said, don't be the guy swinging the hammer, be the guy fixing the thing that swings the hammer, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
always having to work. And two, one of the things with AI, I think we have a lot of trouble with, like right now. So I was trying to break ChatGPT and Bard today. My biggest thing I was trying to break is, okay, I want you to search the latest news articles to talk about things and give me talking points and everything else. And it did it the best it could. But like one of my questions was, who is the new and upcoming CEO for Twitter that was appointed by Elon Musk? And it said,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, it's like there's not one currently." And I said, "Well, what about Linda from the new appointed person?" They're like, "Oh, sorry." I died laughing because Bard told me, "Sorry, we can't give you that information. It only came out a few hours ago."
Yeah, Linda Yaccarino, I
Yeah,
think is her name.
yeah, yeah. And I laughed. I was like, "Well, that came out like last week. Let's be fair here."
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to be limited on how much data it can chunk because I mean, it was the same problem with the blockchain problem is do you have enough power and energy to chunk all the information and process it? Maybe in 5, 10 years, like you said, with quantum computing, but you run into that problem. But I think the other problem is it's a machine at the end of the day. It's kind of like a car. You can't continually run the car if you don't keep putting in gas. And the
Yeah.
same thing with creatives. Yeah, it can create its own AI pictures and everything else, but if it's got nothing else to feed into it, will it create anything new?
All right, I think at best it's just going to create copycat stuff, to be honest with you. I don't
Yeah.
see until we until we come up with a reliable way to do fuzzy logic and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I don't see how it's really going to produce anything original, because the only thing it's has is the data pool that we give it. The issue with like Bard and stuff is it doesn't have actual open access to the internet.
Yeah.
Microsoft is they've run experiments on it a couple of times, and every time it ends up with this like super racist Twitter bot, basically.
Yeah.
And it's because of the information they give it access to and the inherent echo chamber, and the lack of current AI anyway
Yeah.
can't really understand context. It doesn't understand meme culture and stuff like that, which the internet is so pervasive against, are pervasive with. And it's I don't see how, until we give it a way to understand context and relevance, that it's ever going to produce anything new and original, because those things are required for original thought.
Yeah. I don't, and that's my thought. So, like, I always think of the Plato's ideal, right? Essentially, everything's got to come from some type of ideal. So let me look up the actual definitions here. The Plato's ideal state, right? Plato argued that the ideal state, one which ensured the maximum possibility of happiness for its state, one can only be brought into by further ruler possessed by absolute knowledge obtained through philosophical study. when you go through the
Hmm.
Plato's ideal, I mean, one of the examples that we had through philosophy class is kind of like, where did the unicorn come from, right? The ideal
Yeah.
is it came from like a narwhal or a narwhal and a horse kind of put together. So does it continue to do that, or does it, to me, it needs to be kind of continued to give information because it kind of just continually eats and eats and eats itself till there's basically just the same thing over and over and over again, and you get the homogenous human beings from community college as their
Yeah.
mascot.
So, an interesting thing about the unicorn you bring up is it was actually a deer with a broken antler. Was most likely the
Gosh,
original
that's funny.
impetus for how that works.
Yeah.
You know, the number of people that think narwhals are fake is alarming.
Really?
Yeah, I don't understand why you would think that. There's a lot of relevance and a lot of current information that shows you they're real, but a lot of people think they're fake,
Yeah.
because it was in the movie Elf, and Elf is a
Yeah.
fake movie.
Oh, let me correct this. The Platonic ideal is the perfect absolute and external forms. Everything in neutral world is derived from the forms, but only as an imitation and or impersonation of these forms. Right? It's
Yeah,
kind of like Lincoln Logs, right? You can't do it till you put all the linking logs together. But at the end of the day, it was Lincoln Logs.
yeah.
But I mean, I digress. I think it's personally a great tool. I think it will turn developers and engineers into phenomenal people unless there's anything new coming out. But one of the things I realized, like I said, until like you said, 5-10 years later, with with tech coming out there, you're still going to need those senior engineers and people driving new information for it to absorb, right?
Look, anyone can be taught to be a pilot, not everyone can be taught to be a captain. So at
Yes.
some point, the industries that require nothing but pilots, if you will,
Yeah.
or followers, people that they're always going to be at risk for automation taking their jobs. But somebody has to design the automatons, right? Somebody
Yeah.
has to make that work. And every time we replace a series of jobs,
Hmm.
they get moved to some other industry that needs the workforce. I mean,
Okay. For
inherently, society needs people that do a bunch of different things. So not everyone's necessarily going to swing a hammer, but that doesn't mean we don't still need like plumbers and electricians and
I
heli
mean,
pilots and
it makes
mechanics.
reminds me of John Henry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, John Henry versus the Machine, right? I mean, it's a great tall tale. Oh my gosh, whatever happened to those cartoons, right? And those movies and everything
Babe the
else.
Big Blue Ox. Oh,
Yeah, Babe the
loved
Big
it.
Blue Ox. Like, so I
Loved
saw
it,
the
man.
cartoon version. Of course, you have the old Disney version and Warner Brothers version. And then you have obviously the Tall Tales that came out in the 90s, something like that. Yeah. So we have that there, but I mean, just it's I don't think it's gonna die out. I don't think it won't die out, but I will. All right, for everybody out there, we have Brooks's 20 years in experience. I got about 20 years experience too. We work in similar and different fields at the same time, but I saw this in my field as a infrastructure and architect and engineer. Basically, the whole middle class died out. Basically, and every mid second level two engineer kind of died out. Basically by people like me and other people basically writing the automation for it. So you either have a level one or a level three. You got a guy pushing buttons or you got a guy doing this. But I don't think people are going to die out, and I don't want to be afraid of anyone to be afraid of it. What I want to tell everybody who's afraid of it is you just learn how to use ChatGPT, learn how to use Bard, because I think as a future worker, you gotta know how to use those things, or else you will be out of a job. It's like not knowing how to use Excel.
Well, these GPT, like all of the stuff from OpenAI, to be honest, it's like the next evolution of how we treat internet search. It's like the next evolution of Google, which is
Yeah.
probably why Google's put so much money into it. You're gonna have to learn how to use those LLM tools. Otherwise, you're kind of hosed.
Can
Because
you do me
going
a
forward, the
favor?
industry's doing it for you.
Can you do me a favor? Can you explain what LLM is?
It's the language learning model.
Language learning
So when
model.
you feed topics and data into one of the AI processing units, and it's what spits out how it communicates. So there's an NLM, which is the natural language that it speaks back to you, and how it takes input, and the LM is the stuff that you shovel into it to make it understand something. So if
So
you're trying to have it
what is
understand,
what is a Chat GPT then?
it's the interface to the models they've already trained. It's effectively your Google search for a whole bunch of questions,
Yeah.
and they keep training it on new things. So you can make industry specific AI stacks
Hmm.
for doctors, attorneys, finance. It doesn't matter. They've used it for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But it's just like it's the uniquenesses of your query. You have to feed more things into it to train it and teach it what's good value, what's good input. Something we've come across in software a lot
Hmm.
is you have the best tool in the world, but if the data you're using is garbage, your tool is garbage. It can be as pretty as you want, but
Yeah.
if the data sucks, your tool sucks.
Yeah.
And the
Now,
way around that is good data. And that's an issue with the current AI tools is they need good data to
garbage
produce
in, garbage
quality
out.
output. Yep.
Garbage in, garbage out. Okay, so for all the laymen out there, GPT, what does it stand for? It means generative pre-trained transformer, and it usually works in types with the large language models, basically that's used to do it. Like I'll tell everyone, do yourselves a favor, go Google AI Super Mario World and go see or on YouTube, go YouTube it, and you'll see basically how neural networks work and basically how the language models work of it training
Mhm.
itself to play the game. Because basically what you're doing is you're training it to continually move forward, and then when it dies, it moves forward and it tries different buttons. One of the and what those are called generations. So it'll continue to do something, and it'll spread out and try 4 or 5 different variants, essentially kind of like genome processing with different variants, or even virus theory. And essentially with each one of those, you'll have where, oh, this one worked best, so what it'll do, the neural network or language model will then move over to that one to be able to jump over the bad guy, and it'll continue to spit those out and kind of split up into different versions of itself to be able to beat the whole level, basically running an AI model using neural networks.
It's ironically basically a rapid failure model.
Mm-hmm.
It only learns by failure,
It's
which
brute
is a strange
force.
thing to think. Yeah, it's a strange thing to think about as humans because we learn by example, not by failure necessarily. Even though failure
Mm-hmm.
is a really common and powerful tool, the way they work right now is effectively shoveling a bunch of stuff out and validating the output against a trusted peer, a trusted
Mm-hmm.
source, the user being the trusted source, or some other part of the LLM being the trusted source and peer.
Yeah.
So it taught itself to play Mario, for example, by failing as
Yeah.
many different ways as possible, recording the results and see which one got it one more pixel further,
Yeah.
and then also watching the score in the corner to make sure
Yeah.
with OCR to make sure the score went up. But that's how it learned, and it
Yeah.
continues to iterate. I would like so things like video game speed runs. I would imagine at some point AI is going to
Oh,
absolutely
yeah.
be better than a human. For now, humans will still hold it because we
Minus
learn
glitches,
faster.
like the glitches
Yeah.
in Mario where they're doing the speed run. I think it's in level 2. You can glitch into the bricks and basically slide through a
Yeah,
bunch of
go
stuff.
through. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of crazy
yeah.
with that. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I would tell everybody out there, don't necessarily be afraid of it. Yeah, it is going to replace some stuff. It is going to do that, and unfortunately, we're in a weird transitory phase of where we are, kind of like the Industrial Revolution. I really think it's going to be rough. I mean, maybe in 50 years from now, we'll have the Jungle Book written about us in the tech world, right? You
Yeah.
know, and it'll
Well,
and I bet you it'll be written about Silicon Valley. By the way, if you've never seen the show, phenomenal. Mike Judge is phenomenal. My buddy that actually is touring and doing all the stage manning, she actually worked as a production assistant over on Silicon Valley. But if you watch that, it is hands down so real and so scary. And maybe we'll have a Jungle Book written about that then.
one of the things too is so back in the early 2000s when we started having like part of the dot-com boom and bust,
Yeah.
predating the 2008, one of the big concerns was you had these companies with huge workforces or these like migratory white collar workforces
Mm-hmm.
that were being outsourced to different countries, and everyone's like, oh my god, the outsource was going to take everyone's jobs. And they took a lot of jobs, but new jobs and new roles took their place in the
Mm-hmm.
industry. Really all we did was like just trim some of the garbage out of the industry we didn't need. And then you had
Yeah.
back in like 08, 09, a similar thing happened. It wasn't necessarily related to the tech side, it was just the economy as a whole, but it was the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. Outsourcers are going to take all of our jobs. New automation tools are going to take all of our jobs. We're not going to need anyone to go unplug servers anymore. And fast forward another 15 or so years, here we are 2023, and it's still a prevailing concern. And only now it's AI is going to take all of our jobs. The reality is, if your job is so easy to be, this is controversial, and I don't really care. It's just reality. If your job is so easy to be replaced by a bot, it's effectively a fifth grader. you're probably being overpaid for it, and it should be automated anyway, so that you can use that time to be a more skilled operator doing something else.
Well,
It's just normal. I
ghost
mean,
kitchens in during the pandemic. Obviously, a lot of us know about ghost kitchens. If you watch Mr. Beast with his Mr. Beast Burger Ghost Kitchen, those were popular. But amongst all of that, the secret thing that was built for the most part, which by the way, do you guys a favor? Go watch Food Theory and Film Theory with Matt Pat. He talks about this specifically. It's not necessarily the food, the ghost kitchens that are scary. It's the fast food kitchens that are scary because it's getting to the point now where they automate the whole process. Where is it in Florida where they have four fast food restaurants in there, and it basically have like a chute that drops down your food into the car to be delivered through Uber Eats or DoorDash or whatever the case is. Which, I mean, that may end up being replaced too with little robots. We have a place over here
Chick-fil-A
in
does that. The one down the
yeah.
street from us
Oh,
has like a
yeah.
little, yeah, it's got like, it looks like a roaming trash can with hot bays in it. It
Yeah.
can bring you your food while you're sitting there, and it's
Oh,
perfect.
the one over by our other office. It was hilarious. It looks like one of those coolers out on the over on the river when you're rafting, and literally
Hmm.
just going by or whatever the case is. And it's funny, like people kick them over and other stuff like that. But I mean, that's just no. I mean, it. I feel bad. I feel bad saying it because there's so many people that dedicated their lives to a specific task or whatever the case is. But it's unfortunately the part I think of our industrial or technological revolution moving forward. In order for us to move forward, we gotta, jobs shift, they change, everything else, and it's a terrible situation with everything else that's going on.
I mean, so Burger King and McDonald's both have all those automated restaurants like what
Hmm.
you're talking about. And at first, it was just like automated order taking from basically a fancy ATM machine or like self checkout. But now
Yeah.
they have them where it's an automated entire assembly line. They can make anything that the restaurant sells in any combination. And the machines are expensive, right?
Hmm.
Because they're roughly like eight or $900,000 if I remember correctly from
Yeah.
the paper I was reading. But they replace like $3 million a year in labor, so there's no reason to not run them. Plus, now the restaurant's going to shift to 24-hour. The shrinkage goes way down. There's no human error for the most part, but they didn't necessarily lose all their employees. They just hired a bunch of new types of employees. It requires specialized training to work on the machines to keep them up to date. It requires people to load the hoppers that have all the raw materials in them and all that stuff, and to unload the trucks that come in. So it isn't necessarily automating people out of a job, but it absolutely changes the industry in a way that honestly industries need to grow, they need to expand, and they need to advance. And if they don't, they die. Those three things are required for like generational products and generational industries. And if you don't do it and you don't grow with what everything else is around you, you're gonna be left behind by all of your competitors that do those things. McDonald's is leading the charge. Burger King was right behind him. Chick-fil-A has got a bunch of that stuff moving. All the major fast food chains are looking into this process. Even grocery stores. I went to Walmart today to get something, and there was one human being and like 30 self-checks because it's just cheaper and easier, and there's less shrink and less risk just having all the self-checks,
I
which is
agree with
weird
you.
to me.
Yeah,
I'd rather talk to someone and see someone in person, but I'm clearly a dinosaur.
I mean, okay, what's funny is I think more and more people are moving to that model where they're talking about Gen Alpha and kind of the late stages of Gen Z, basically all wanting to go in, all wanting to go to places. We have this place, we have a Gearbox that's close to us, right? One of the Gearbox locations, and they have this little coffee shop over there that everybody tends to go over to. And is everyone's kind of getting sick of I mean, online is phenomenal. It's big. There's influencers and everything else, but you're seeing a lot more people. I laugh. It reminds me of the episode. Do you ever watch the cartoon Recess? And there's the episode. It's like the movie where they basically are I don't remember. It's an episodic, 3 or 4, where they get rid of recess altogether,
Mhm.
and then they end up realizing the kids are tanking, and they're like, okay, we're creating this new thing that nobody's ever heard of before, and
It's still just recess.
and it's an outside thing, and we're calling it recreational, blah blah blah, but we're calling it Reckus.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's my thought on that. Well, for all of that, we're gonna switch here our turns for a little bit. You have a huge history in data centers.
I
in
do.
cloud computing and everything else. I have a huge history also in that, in private clouds and data center migrations and everything else. The biggest thing I'm hearing these days is it's too expensive to be in the cloud now for certain
So
applications. And I'm hearing a massive shift of moving into private clouds or people's own servers again. Snowflake stock plunged. I don't know if you saw that on week outlooks, even with slow cloud computing.
so cloud computing has a place. Honestly, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, SD, they're all the same thing. We've been doing the same thing for 25 years, probably 30 if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they have their place. Centralized management has its strengths and weaknesses. The
Yeah.
problem right now is that people shove everything into the cloud with no knowledge whatsoever of what types of compute resources are required, what storage and growth realities are there for that storage, what kind of internet access is required, the type of content you're trying to deliver, the regulatory issues, and they get hit with these huge bills out of nowhere. And they just wonder, oh, what, I'm in the cloud. Everyone said it's super cheap, or it's more reliable, it's
Mm-hmm.
more whatever. Famously, Netflix has had they're in Amazon AWS,
Yeah.
one of the largest cloud providers in the world, and they have outages every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a huge one that was quite long because even though they're in Amazon's AWS cloud, they
Yeah.
only leased one facility because it was too expensive for
Yeah.
multiple facilities, and they thought it'll never go down. It's Amazon, and it went down, and they
Well,
lost
you know it's
several hundred thousand
crazy.
subscribers.
Do you know the only? Can you tell me the only video hosting company that's spread out geographically speaking?
You mean like internationally?
No, no, no. Let's call it within the United States. The only
YouTube, Google is
no
the only one that's yeah. Google's got,
Netflix.
but they're not.
When the S tier went down, apparently, they were the only one that were scattering their data enough where when they had that huge outage, when Amazon Prime went down for their
Yeah,
video and everything else, Netflix was the only one still running without interruption.
they had no. Which one are you talking about? The one a couple years ago, or the one like five? I'm talking about the one like 5 or 6 years ago.
No,
They were
this was
still.
recently. It wasn't a long blip, but basically what I was reading on, I have to find the article, but what Netflix was saying was we got worried from 5 years ago, so we started to spread out
Yeah,
a little bit more and
yeah.
basically
They leased a lot more pops from Amazon, but they were
yeah.
still on
Yeah, well,
Amazon's.
they fractured everything out though. So instead of
Yeah,
having a huge amount of people down, like with Amazon Video
yeah. It
Prime
was just
down,
region specific.
yeah, it
Yeah,
was region
that stuff goes
specific.
down all the
Oh
time.
yeah,
I think YouTube is probably the only large scale multinational
yeah,
um, video service with like the ability. It's like when we built our original set of data centers, we wanted to be able to take entire regions offline and still reroute traffic. And Google does the same thing with how their data centers are built. Facebook does it as well, but not to
yeah,
anywhere near the scale that Google does. I mean, the reality is Google processes thousands of hours a second of video, and they're replaying millions of minutes every hour of video as well, all over the world at all the time. So when Netflix went down, they did lease more pops. They had like 5 or 6 more pops, but they did not. They didn't
no,
leave Amazon's cloud, which would have been nice if they
yeah,
did.
wrong article. So it's the article. This was from 2011, basically,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
they
that's the
yeah.
that's the old one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, where they basically kind of took that and we're talking about and we're talking about basically how they kind of changed the way that they did everything, but also
hmm
they've gotten into fights with like South Korea and everybody else with just the bandwidth that they're using.
yeah. It would be nice to see Netflix before they went on
Yeah,
Amazon. They had a self-hosted,
yeah,
and then they moved away from it because they're like it's too expensive to vault this data,
yeah.
and they moved everything wholesale into the same facility in Virginia
Hmm.
for Amazon, and then it went down, and it
So
cost them several hundred thousand subscribers, and then they leased pops all over the
yeah,
place.
so with
The
that being
content
yeah,
libraries go down with that too, not just
yeah,
service.
yeah,
They lose whole content libraries.
yeah. With that being said, I mean, what's your thought? Who needs a cloud? Who doesn't need a cloud these days? Like compared to 5 years ago, when everyone was SaaS crazy. Which SaaS
Um,
for everybody is software as a service. Anything that you log onto online and don't have to install.
Who needs a cloud is kind of a lengthy question
Mm-hmm.
because every client's needs are going to be different. The big thing is if you need your data to be available from several places at once
Yeah.
and located across several facilities for redundancy or compliance or insurance purposes or whatever it happens to be,
Yeah.
cloud is a good solution provided you have the budget to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't do any public cloud back when we did it. We only did private, and and well, private and hybrid.
Yeah.
But we kind of, if you have a ton of data or a large number of files, or if your workforce primarily has access to really good bandwidth, it can be a good solution to go into the cloud. Some things, and like if you need to host a lot of video or host a lot of accessible content to third
Yeah.
parties, the cloud can be a great solution. But it really starts to fall apart when your end users or your facilities have like terrible internet connections.
Yeah.
The reality is not every place in the US has bandwidth even over 10 megabit.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, most cell phones are faster than the average home internet outside of like cities and major metro areas in the United States. Part of that's an RBI issue, but that's really like 2 or 3 episodes for the content alone. I could rant on
Yeah.
the garbage of how that works.
Yeah.
But one of the things is when customers used to tell us that they want to move into the cloud, we'd really have to go through and take stock and inventory of both the business practices and the technology they were currently using and where they wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to vault 10 terabytes in the cloud, it's going to be horrifically expensive. And if you're
Yeah.
growing at any kind of appreciable rate, it's going to be horrifically expensive because you have to vault that information somehow.
Yeah.
And getting into like different tiers of storage and accessibility and management just kind of becomes a bit of a headache
Yeah.
long term, unless you have staff dedicated to doing it. Your average on-site IT team is not going to have the skill set required to do it well, to
Yeah.
get you into the right places and the right companies for the right things. Because some of it you want to separate your vendors too. You don't want everything in one company's bucket, as
Yeah.
Netflix has famously seen and Microsoft has seen. On multiple occasions, Office 365 has gone down for hours at a time for whole regions of the country.
Yeah.
And it's common enough that half the time anymore, I'm like, is it really worth putting this client with 200 mailboxes and people in 6 states in Office 365, or who just want to do like a multi-home on-prem hybrid solution or something like
Yeah.
that might be slightly more effective. But it really all comes down to the amount of data that you need, the types of services you need, the regulation, and your growth potential for what you think it is. Because you're not just paying for storage, you're paying
Yeah.
for delivery. So if
Yeah.
you think you're going to have a huge project that's going to need half terabyte of transfer, which doesn't sound like much, but you could eat a half terabyte. A creative agency can eat a half terabyte of transfer in a couple of days,
Yeah.
and then you start getting a bill, and you get billed
Yeah.
by the gigabyte or by the 100 gigabytes. The next thing you know, you're looking at like a $5,000 bandwidth bill for your $350 a month cloud storage or something. And you're like,
Yeah.
where is this bill coming from? And even to get your data out, you have to pay the same thing because you got to pay to take out whatever you put in
Yeah.
at whatever their extraction rate is. It's never the same price. So it's really hard to tell who needs to be in the cloud. A lot of people still want to be in the cloud, but
Yeah.
I would say probably 40% of the businesses that are up there probably have no business being in the cloud, and a proper hybrid solution
Yeah.
or a data center solution for like co-hosting or something would probably be a better buy long term and more in line with the skill set of their existing employees. Because you know as well as I do,
Yeah.
Ben, most people know nothing about how to properly manage one of those instances.
No, it's okay. So I whether it's BlackBerry Server Exchange, whatever the case is, what's a pain in the butt, or if you're using PHP Mail Send or whatever homegrown Pop Lab. One also, I did want to clarify: co-host or co-location is kind of a phrase we use in the tech industry where you have your own servers and you basically don't want to be beholden or subjected to your own internet. Like if you're in Colorado and your internet goes down or whatever the case is, essentially you'd put your servers that you have into a data center and you would literally rent a cabinet or rent like basically like rack space, like if there's actually a company called Rackspace, funny enough. But if you guys ever watch Linus Tech Tips, all those servers and those racks, you can sometimes take all those servers and racks, put it into a kind of a co-location where everyone shares, and you can pay for like an internet, up and down and whatnot. And sometimes you have to be careful because there's some places that are unmetered. There's some places that are unlimited bandwidth, which is they're two different things. Everyone's got to remember there's unmetered and then unbandwidth, where unmetered is you can do as much as you want, but you only may have, 1 gig of bandwidth or something like that, whatever the case is. But those are great alternatives as an interim solution where it's just a little bit cheaper, if
Well,
just
it
for
really
everyone's
is.
edification.
So when you co-locate something, it's not just internet, it's power pipe ping and cooling.
Yes.
If you are worried about the power stability in your area
Mm-hmm.
or the internet stability in your area or your cooling capacity, that's where a data center makes really good sense because that's what they guarantee is power pipe and
Yeah.
ping. So they guarantee that your servers are powered, they guarantee that your internet works, and they guarantee the environment is conducive to running well, so it's nice and cool. Outside of that, for the most part, you're responsible for whether or not your server has Windows updates or whatever the hell it happens to be you've stuck out there. And if you've got a team that's used to managing on-site, that is the closest skill set wise, the closest migration for getting your infrastructure in a place that bypasses some of your local limitations. We come across clients all the time that are like, I have 1 gig internet, I want to host all my servers here. Or I should have good power because I'm in the city. They have brownouts and internet issues, but the co-located servers and stuff are still up and running because those facilities are on diesel backup or some other form
Yeah.
of backup
Well,
power.
so
They're
you
on
say
multiple
power ping
power
and
pipe and
ping,
ping.
power pipe and ping. So
Yeah, so
pipe.
the internet responds correctly. You
Yeah.
have enough bandwidth, or you can grow to the bandwidth you need, and then you're powered.
So I want to talk about pipe for a minute, and I'm going to jump here. Dark fiber rings. What are dark fiber rings, basically, or not even dark fiber? What are fiber rings? Because most of the data centers, basically, that you would dump these into, they literally directly connect to these fiber rings, typically to get basically kind of the unfeathered service that they're needing.
So it's just a network. It's like a private peering network. Dark fiber is private peering, unlit, so
Yeah.
no carrier services attached to it
Yeah.
outside of the local
Yeah.
loop provider.
Well, like for Linus Tech Tips, he talks about how they're directly connected to the ring all the time. What is the ring?
So they are connected directly to their upstream provider.
Yeah.
So they're probably on like Rogers or Telstra or something. I don't
Well,
know
what
exactly
is
what
a
they're
ring
on
for
there.
people who are listening who are in tech and just wanting to learn?
It's just the physical cables that run between all the countries that provide connectivity, not necessarily internet only, but that provide connectivity. It used to be copper for phone systems, and then we made them a bunch of other things. But that's all the rings are. They're literally just rings of connectivity, physical cablings, in some cases microwave, but we'll just call it physical cabling for the
Yeah.
purpose of conversation that connect all the different areas. It's like an old
Okay.
version of the phone system.
So the only
Why
reason I
it's
say
called
that
as
is because
poorly as it
because
is.
I'm sure some of our audience is learning in this process because part of this is we want to do some teaching moments so we can also give a little bit away of our knowledge. I'm going to be honest with you, not really worried about people taking our jobs either on our side, but we want to also tell people about rings and fibers. For example, you have like Minneapolis, St. Paul, you have Dallas, Fort Worth, you have Kansas. Kansas City is famous for having a huge ring that goes between Missouri, Kansas, everything over there. That's why you have a lot of that Google Fiber that's laid out over there because there's a huge ring that goes around all of those cities to be able to pass the information all around to each other as a quick backbone to the internet.
So those are called meet me rooms or meet me areas. They're
Yeah,
all over the world, but they're for the
yeah,
purposes of this, they're in the US. They're primarily in large tier one data centers.
yeah,
So you'll have like AT&T and T and Comcast and Verizon or Frontier or whatever their label happens to be in the area that you're in, all coming into these data center facilities that are
yeah,
again guaranteed power pipe and ping. And so you have a bunch of carriers coming into one facility and then they spread back out through like the metro circuit. Used to be Metro E, which is Metro Ethernet. Now it's all over fiber, but or it goes to microwave. But those facilities, the big tier one facilities, have basically giant network hubs. You can look at them like looks like legs off a spider. All the legs come into one place and then get spread back out.
yeah,
So you've got the big one in Houston, the big one in Dallas, the big one in Amarillo, the big one in like Georgia's got two huge ones. Virginia has several. DC, Ohio, Arkansas, Arkansas.
Arkansas. Yep.
Basically, there's at least one giant hub in every major metro state. Denver has a huge one, and all the internet for the region travels up those pipes, and that's what Ben's talking about.
Yeah, and think of it, guys, as a bigger version of your network at your small business or your home. You have maybe your little off switches here and there, and then when you go into the big server room that's really loud, you have these big 48 port and or stack switches that can go up 96 ports or whatever the case is, and those are kind of those rings, and then you have the core switch basically that does all the routing for everything. The reason I bring that up though is, did you know? So I went to the State of the City event for the city of Ontario, not Ontario, Canada, but Ontario, California. It's a suburb of LA. When they were over there, they announced that the city basically passed the bill, passed a bill and everything else for them to build their own fiber circuit over there for everything, their own fiber ring, basically for everything that for that whole area. So they're laying fiber like crazy, and their goal is to get broadband to the entire city and all the residents. But on top of that, provide a backbone, I guess, for a lot of business out there, which I believe the city of Ontario is very business friendly.
Yeah. So Tennessee did that 9 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They have their own like city internet. I know that McKinney is doing something similar. Venus has done something like that because we helped put it in.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because they basically, when they do this, they subsidize super high speed internet for businesses. And it's so much cheaper to do because you can buy like a 10 gig pipe for relatively inexpensive, for the purposes of conversation anyway, relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
And then resell that access as municipal access to all the businesses and homes in the area. And everyone gets access to really high speed network. All the intra network traffic is basically free because you're never really leaving the ring that you're sitting on. Not realistically anyway. And again, for purposes of conversation, I'm simplifying this, but it's a really unique thing. And the cities that do it have had really good luck. One, it turns internet access they're paying for anyway into a revenue opportunity.
Yeah.
Two, it brings the quality of internet for the entire area that they're in. And three, it's a massive marketing point when you're trying to attract new businesses and new people to move in. I know that there's a lot of apartment complexes in Texas that are starting to do that as well, where they have like a data co-op that comes through. They normally don't buy enough bandwidth. We've helped companies put those in the past. We make a recommendation, budget usually wins out, and they don't buy what we want, and residents complain, but the tech that gets put in is still capable of doing what they want. As long as it's done well, it's a really cool opportunity. I'm curious to see what sort of extra rules and regulation, because it is California, they're going to bolt on top of the access, because there's going to be something, just given the state that it's in. But it is a really neat idea, and I personally, I think it's great, as long as it's done right.
Yeah, I like it too. It always reminds me. Listen, as everyone's going to learn throughout all these, I watch a lot of television. I make a lot of funny references. Comedies are typically my favorite, and I'll make a lot of references, like I'm about to right now, to Parks and Rec when they won the free Wi-Fi for the whole city, but they also had the thing where he fell asleep, and when the new Star Wars came out, and they snuck in the deal about selling everyone's private information. It kind of cracks me up. That's what that reminds me of that. So I just thought it was interesting to see a city basically, because you usually see it in metropolitan areas. You don't see just one city do a whole ring by themselves, which is kind of cool. But also I love the idea though that they're giving internet basically to the whole city and the residents as a part of, hey, we've made a good commitment. We've made good investment towards what we need to do and what we want to do to be able to do that, so our residents can benefit from it, which is great.
Yeah, it really does. If it's done well, it really is a huge opportunity that is, generally speaking, really quality high-speed internet is priced out of a lot of areas without some form of investment. And it's a really cool opportunity for that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, all right, so here's a big question. Let's talk internet for a minute. Is internet a utility, or is internet a nice to have service?
Internet is absolutely a requirement.
So and I use the specific word utility because obviously that's the big fight politically speaking with everyone saying.
It's regulated like a telco utility. It's regulated like where copper was regulated for the last 50 years in this country, which is part of the reason why we've had such really, really poor investment from carriers, because to get access to RBI, which is the Rural Broadband Initiative, but to get access to that grant money, they really don't have to spend anything. They just have to. They say, "Oh yeah, we meet the minimum." I think the current minimum is like 3 megabit or something ridiculously low like that.
Yeah.
The reality is, if you're not running at least 25 to 50 megabit, it's really not broadband anymore. Given the
Yeah.
bulk of the services that ride on all of our connections these days, it needs to be reevaluated. I doubt they're going to. They've tried a couple of times, but I highly doubt they're ever going to actually do that. But it
Yeah.
is regulated like a utility, just not well. I mean, it's literally still managed as if it was 50-year-old copper, and it's really frustrating. And then things like cable providers, so like Comcast, Charter, and WB, and whatever else they're called, they're all the same
Yeah.
company. They are regulated like TV services, so
Yeah.
they don't even have like a QoS requirement for the most part for the end user for uptime or performance or anything. Which is why when you buy cable internet, it's shared with your entire neighborhood and probably 2 neighborhoods over, and they'll drop 10 gigs or 5 gigs into a neighborhood, and they give everyone 800 megabit, but they don't make the rest of the investment to make
Yeah.
it actually
We
work that
used
fast.
to we used to laugh about that because obviously you have the techs working for Comcast or Spectrum or whoever, whatever it is out there, and we used to die laughing because we would get Janice or Steve or anybody come into the office, and they're like, "Hey Ben, I need to get better internet so I can work from home. My tech was telling me I need to be closer to the central office. Can you make me closer to the central office? Is that moving my wireless access?" And I'm like, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no. That's way different. And I was like, central office. I was like, yes. I mean, it's important, but it's not as important. So you have providers. What I think Suddenlink's what's now Optima or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
But like them for Suddenlink, it was important to be closer to the central office because their central office would be. I'm going to use an example like Balk Springs, Texas. That was a central office for almost I don't know 40 miles or 30 miles or something ridiculous like that. Well, which is insane because typically you want to be. I don't remember. You want to be what was it like 100 mile or no? I'm sorry, not like 10 miles away at max.
Yeah, so a lot of those services are like old school bonded T lines or
Yeah,
like bonded DSL, and that's why
yeah,
and they're run on actual copper, and that's where
yeah.
distance really makes a big
Yeah.
difference.
Well, but we
Um,
tell people though these days the tech has changed so much. I mean, you're the last person on your block in your neighborhood, you're really not
yeah,
going to have that much of an issue. If you like say you have Spectrum, go to your backyard or your front yard, you're going to see typically a green pole and you're going to have 8 people running on your line. And then that will have a central hub that's maybe I don't know, less than a mile away or something like that. So usually it's not terrible now.
yeah. So when you look at like so AT&T has their Uverse fiber product,
Yeah.
Frontier and Verizon both have direct fiber. I'm talking about consumer only, in the US anyway. There are a bunch of other companies that sell fiber. They're small rebranded networks. The bulk
Yeah.
majority of those are not really their own fiber provider. They're all going
Yeah.
to lease from like the big six,
Yeah.
and there's really no way around that outside of building your own infrastructure. And it's not really viable, obviously, for a home, but it is. Businesses do it all the time. We used to build dozens of them a month.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of hard to internet issues, especially when you're looking like rural or non-metro areas, are really hard to troubleshoot because you'll have cable providers are the worst about this. They'll have like 20 hops before you ever make it out to the open internet. And the weirdest thing is you can just change your DNS settings to something from like OpenDNS or something like that and eliminate a whole bunch of them
Yeah.
because they want to push your traffic through as many lines that they own because it's cheaper than necessarily the fastest connection to what you're doing. So if you have like a low latency requirement, gaming, video conferencing, or some sort of real-time collaboration tool, some of these services are just never going to work well for you because of how they're physically designed.
Well,
And
okay,
moving
so
closer isn't going to fix that all the time
so
either.
is the solution for that then Starlink?
The base problem with Starlink right now is the base latency is kind of high. It's not bad.
Okay.
I know streamers that use Starlink,
Okay.
but when you look at like Frontier in the U.S., when it works, caveat when it
Yeah.
works, is probably the fastest fiber provider, at least in Texas. They beat Google all the time, and they're like 2 millisecond is the latency for most of my stuff because it's 2 hops out, and then I'm on the
Yeah.
open internet. And you look at Starlink, and the same connectivity on Starlink could be 50 to 150. And it's also based on where the satellites are in space above you, the number of people on your node, because it's not really a one-to-one connection for satellite. It'll be like you could have 3,000 people on there, and they
Yeah.
oversell the individual satellite connections all the time right now.
Okay.
If you're
So,
looking for wireless internet, though,
I mean, you
for
looking like
capacity,
like
that's the
local
price.
microwave people that set up the big towers and run fiber to a backbone and then microwave it to you.
You can do that as well, and those are like usually somewhere between 18 and 24 milliseconds of latency. You're getting into the upper reaches of like VoIP applications and stuff when you start
Yeah.
doing that because you have a bunch of other like latency that comes from like the protocol edition and everything else.
Yeah.
But so I've had good luck personally with microwave. Out at the ranch, we have microwave set up between all
Yeah.
the buildings. We've got fiber coming in. We just blow it out over a few hundred acres, and it works great.
Well, maybe that's something we can do. Maybe we can break up this podcast like this, where we'll like go over news. We'll do some like tech testing that we don't really see people doing, and maybe give some advice. But like I have Starlink, and I have a really old account, so I don't know if I told you, but I actually got an email the other day saying that because my account is so old, I don't have a caps or bandwidth limitations.
Yeah, you have one of the old ones.
Yeah, so maybe
The
that's some.
minute you start using it, they're going to give you one anyway because
Okay.
they rate limit the service regardless. They have
Yeah.
to right now because
Yeah.
they need to launch. I think Musk said it was like 4,000 or
Well,
5,000 more
let's
satellites.
see how many are left here. Let's see how much of our space trash is left to throw up there. Our satellites left.
Well, I know they have like because they were doing testing on them the other day, and I know that
Yeah.
they've got like several thousand more they're trying to light. Some of that's to take over the load that's coming from like the free stuff he's given over in Europe for what's going on with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it too is people only getting like 200 megabit that need a gig. They were sold 500 megabits. So what they're doing is they're buying 4 or 5 dishes and accounts and they're bonding them together to get the performance they need. The reality is what they're doing is slowing down the entire network anyway, because if it's oversold, it's oversold.
Ooh, okay. So they're saying, let's see, as of May 2023, Starlink consists of over 4,000 mass-produced small satellite and low Earth orbit or LEO, which communicate with the designated ground transceivers. In total, 12,000 satellites are planned to be deployed with a possible later extension of 42,000 or up to 42,000. That's insane.
Yeah, they're going to be chucking a lot more, and they need to. So the goal is to have basically like a satellite-based fiber network from a performance and latency standpoint, which requires there to be no holes in the rotation of the satellites. And the only way to do that is to just put a
Well, I mean,
metric
that's a massive mesh network at the end of the
them.
day. So, I mean, you know, what's funny is I think, this is my prediction, I may be wrong. I think 15, 20 years from now that I think our satellite mesh network will become a backbone. Not that the fiber cables and the underwater cables and everything won't also be a backbone. I think the fiber background. I look forward to quasi quantum information, basically not quantum computing, but basically quantum flip bit type stuff, where essentially you have two rotating particles, and basically when you put it in observance mode where it freezes, you know what the other one is, almost for instant communication. Obviously, that's years
I don't
away,
think that
but
the satellites are going to have
No,
any
no, no,
effect
no.
on that. We
No,
are gonna have
I don't
ubiquitous
think
internet probably another year or two.
I
It's
don't
just
think
the
satellites are going to
reality.
have an effect on it, but I think like it's kind of like you ever watch the movie oh my gosh, is it Live Free Die Hard? Kind of terrible. I love Kevin Smith in it, but I love Justin Long in it, but is Starlink going to end up just being kind of the backbone network we go to for random things? It's like, oh my gosh, I need to
think
get.
it's going to be the like that tech is probably going to be the de facto internet of choice. So like at some point cell phones are going to move to that structure because one,
Yeah.
it's cheaper to do the kind of internet that we do now
Yeah.
to have them communicate directly. So the way we have cell phones set up now with the way the towers work and the hard lines that go to it, we had massive issues in states of emergency all the time. And
Yeah.
moving to the satellite only network would absolutely remove the kinds of issues that we
Yeah.
have whenever we have major disasters, because you're not reliant on a tower.
Yeah.
We have the tech now. It's in use now. Google actually does part of it, but they use it over a Wi-Fi, customized Wi-Fi mesh. You've got like services like the way Helium works,
Yeah.
which is a crypto and is also like a crypto mining thing, but
Mm.
their type of internet theoretically survives that sort of issue.
Yeah.
And once we get enough satellites up there, you basically have engulfed the planet in internet connectivity,
Yeah.
and any kind of device can talk to it, whether or not there's a centralized tower. And it's a really, really cool piece of tech. And the actual hardware is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
It's feasible in the next few years. We're gonna have phones that have a capable chipset. So
Yeah.
at the very least, you know,
Well, hell,
connect to
I
some sort
mean,
of relay
Nvidia
station.
just launched their edge computing AI. I
Yeah,
mean
the
that.
tensor
Yeah.
hardware is really, really neat. I sent you that thing a few days
Yeah.
ago about it. What that's gonna do for as like an AI gateway, and especially given the type of power that's in there, is pretty freaking nuts. The opportunity is there to really be very disruptive in whatever industry someone chucks some software on for it,
Yeah.
because it gives you access to the learning tools and the interface on dedicated hardware designed to run
Yeah.
it.
Well, and
And
it's so
that's pretty freaking
I,
cool.
I think a lot of the future is going to be modular, just in general, because I mean it's an ebb and flow, right? We go from monolithic arrays of data storage units of this huge multi gigabyte units back in the 90s
Hmm.
and 60s
Hmm.
when they're huge monolithic and fill entire rooms to everyone's got their personalized computer because they couldn't hold, at some point it ended up being everyone's information was on their personal
Hmm.
computer, and then now it's back into the cloud and everything else. But I think of this theory of, as we do it, we're going to have, I think, obviously fragmented and data on like our cell phones and everything else kind of moving around, which is, if you ever seen Silicon Valley, it's basically blockchain data that is spread across everyone's information so you can't actually use it. But here's my theory, and I think this may be smart. I don't know. We'll see if I'm on the podcast here in a week or two and when we get back on. But I think we're going to have fractional power in general. I think there's,
So microgrids are like a big to do right
yeah.
now.
Yeah, because
People putting their own grids in because
that's
there's
the
no
only
way
way
for
to
us to
keep up.
supply enough power.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no way to have a monolithic power source with everything, and having microgrids like I know a lot of people give crap about solar and everything else, but these are all stepping stones to different type of technologies. I would say in 2035 we're gonna have fusion technology. It's just we're almost there. We're about 15 to 12 years away from it. MIT's already worked on their smaller condensed unit. It uses
Yeah, they had a
hydrogen. Yeah,
successful test like what, a month ago, I think it was. I
yeah,
read the thing
we're
where they
produced positive.
successfully produced more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it produced more, but more importantly, on top of that, it also it obviously its only source is hydrogen, so it can't run away. You just stop the source of energy, but the byproduct of it isn't isotopes that are basically destroying everything. You get helium as
Yeah.
the byproduct of it. So
Which
you
we need a
we
ton of.
exactly. So until we get to kind of that point, because I think that's going to be the next monolith. Because I don't know if I think it's maybe 40 or 30 years away from it being able to be condensed, where we have the Mr. Fusion from Back to the Future in your car. Which, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, can you imagine the Mr. Fusion being real?
The amount of power, I saw someone did like a calculation on the amount of power it would
Yeah,
take to fly a car with
yeah,
currently available technology and to get over the physics of it.
yeah.
And it was like the Mr. Fusion could power, like the state of Texas for a week to
Yeah.
fly the car for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
And
I mean, that's what I think about. I think of the Mr. Fusion, and I think that's about 30 years away. But but for now, we have to do microgrids. I think that's the only way to keep up with it. And I mean, we have individual internet with Starlink. We have individual everything else. I mean, we see more and more people with their own land doing their own internet and everything else. I mean,
Mhm.
be a programmer in the middle of the woods or the middle of the desert or wherever you want to be and get your info out. But I think microgrids are the way to go. And even though I'm not a big fan, like I think solar's important and I think it's a phenomenal stepping stone.
it's great for a house. It's bad
There,
for like a municipality because it
yeah,
can't produce enough power
yeah,
and store enough power for the times when it isn't producing to run grids efficiently. The other problem right
yeah,
now that we have is that when you get solar, at least in Texas, and most of the United
Yeah.
States is this way, but when you get solar, you're still connected to the power grid. The reason the power company pays you is because you're pushing power back into it.
Yeah.
In the event of a grid collapse, your home still has no power. You have solar
Yeah.
panels. They're
Oh,
making power. It gets shunted into
it
nothing
also depends on the
because you
state
can't
though
feed
too.
back into the grid.
Well, yeah, which is it also depends on the state. Like obviously some states you can have power walls, and some states and counties or cities or whatever, you can feed back to them and make money, but you can't freaking feed your own house. So
You
because
have to have your own on-site retention of energy.
yeah,
So it has to go into like a power wall or something.
yeah.
And you
Or
can
we'll
run your house off
yeah.
the power wall, but you can't run off your panels because
Yeah.
panels have to be grid connected. And most of the states are
Yeah,
that way.
it's
Same thing
a
with water. That's a
well, it's like a
yeah.
whole three phase thing. But by the way, anybody go watch Undecided if you want to know anything more about power. Undecided is one of my favorite
Oh,
YouTube
Matt.
channels.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, that guy is
yeah,
amazing.
just
Him and his brother
phenomenal. Yeah.
videos are so good too.
Yeah, and watching those videos, I mean, we're pushing for new cell technology because lithium isn't
Mhm.
viable. It just really isn't viable long term with everything that's going on. Not to, by the way, do you ever sit there and go, "Oh my God, if there's not enough lithium, what about all the people that have to take lithium?"
Yeah, well, it's a different kind of
I know that, but you sit there and you wonder, like, "Oh my gosh, should they got enough lithium?" But I mean, I digress. But go watch
Well, the
Matt on
biggest issue with
power.
lithium is that China, just like cobalt, contain like they have almost all of the mines
Yeah.
worldwide.
Oh my
So if
gosh.
China
Yeah.
decides they're not giving it to you, you're not getting it.
Well,
And lithium degrades at such a
yeah.
rapid rate when it's in batteries.
Yeah, did you see? I mean, did you see the video that that Musk did where they're talking about, hey, cobalt? Cobalt's just bad, 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 bad.
Hmm.
They're like, well, listen, we know we mine because they didn't want him mining from those facilities, and he basically stood up in the shareholder meeting. He's like, fine, put up a camera in there. If you see it or spot it, we'll get that fixed right away. He's like, but we use a very little amount of cobalt for connectors and other things like that, or for
Hmm.
heat shields or other things. Which cobalt's very hard, by the way.
Hmm.
He's like, what is funny though is, all your cell phones are almost all cobalt,
Hmm.
and it was just
Yeah,
like, whoa,
yeah. They don't really use the kinds of rare earth metals that are in like most modern electric vehicles
yeah,
outside of like the big three. They're not used anywhere near the rate that modern consumer electronics use. I mean, your
yeah,
laptop has got more carcinogenic crap in it and stuff that's like comes from a controversial mine
yeah,
than like your house does more than your car ever will
yeah.
because they don't need the same quantities of things. Hell, steel alone is its own thing.
Gosh.
Most of our steel still comes from China. It's not
Do
really
we do we need
mined and
another do
processed.
we need
I don't
another
know.
Andrew Carnegie? Is that what that is?
I don't know. It's special
The
ed.
steel
You know,
company.
yeah.
All right.
One thing too about just talking about like microgrids and alternative energy
Yeah, yeah.
is something that gets overlooked a lot. Solar and wind get the biggest boost from this. It's like geothermal and hydroelectric
Yeah.
produce
Whatever
an
happened to
enormous amount of
geothermal?
potential.
Did you ever
It's
watch Dirty
it's
Jobs? They
yes,
did a
it's only
full
used in a
episode
few
on it.
places.
Yeah, they did a
But
full episode.
we have ways to do geothermal on top of the earth, not just like near volcanoes and stuff like that. Just and there's a few places that do it, but
Yeah.
very, very, very few. Honestly, the cleanest mass power we can make is nuclear, and nuclear
Oh
is
yeah.
so much safer than it ever was. And the byproduct at this point is salt on a lot of them, and
Yeah.
they can't overrun. And like the last big disaster we had was in Japan, and
Yeah.
even for the potential energy they were putting out, it was incredibly minor what happened at the end of the day. It's not like Chernobyl. Everyone's worried that all nuclear power is Chernobyl, that
Yeah.
all the waste is just tons and tons and tons of generated waste. The reality is you could put all of the nuclear waste for all of the entire world in something smaller than a football field. Like
Yeah.
it is not at all
Can we
what
launch it into space?
you would not want to do that. That would be
Why?
a terrible idea.
Why is
Do
that? For
not.
people that don't know.
Okay, well, you know that like trash in your ocean's real bad, right?
Yeah.
Ruins everything.
Absolutely.
Microplastics, all the
Yep.
rest of the crap.
Yep. Yep.
Save the fishes. Now imagine doing that with nuclear waste and just chucking it at a planet.
Yeah.
Do we want to throw our nuclear radiated material at planets like
Yeah.
little meteors? I don't think we do.
Yeah. Well,
That's why it's a
yeah.
bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, but most people go, "Oh, just throw it into the sun." I saw that on Futurama, or I saw
Oh my
that on.
god.
Can you imagine the
Yes.
polarities getting screwed over that?
I mean, the reality is the sun would most likely burn and absorb
Yeah.
whatever it is because it's fission. The sun is fish. Like it's its own thing, and it would just burn whatever we chucked at it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we want to be chucking things at a star, which the sun is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you
I
know,
do.
go ahead.
No, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say no. That just reminds me of like I think a magnetic pole. I mean, all of that stuff saves us from cosmic radiation. And I was we'll have to save this for another time. Talk about Europa on Jupiter, and it basically it's double layer protection because I think it's all pretty much solid. Solid.
It's got a solid outer shell, basically.
What is it? I think it's solid nitrogen, I think right now. It's
Yeah,
solid.
something
It's
like
like
that.
cold solid nitrogen, but they're saying that might be
Yeah.
able to have vast oceans underneath it and terraform and everything else. But what's cool about that is you get the magnetic pull of the moon of Europa, but also you get the magnetic protection from Jupiter as well, is what they're saying. So it's kind of you get a
Yeah.
double layer protection, which is really cool. Which for anybody that
It's
doesn't know, the aurora borealis or the northern lights is basically the cosmic radiation being protected by by our magnetic poles.
Yeah, and I'm really encouraged actually with space travel. I'm actually super encouraged with some of the research coming
Yeah.
out for some new types of engines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the designs for crafts built in space without some
Yeah.
of the same limitations. A lot of things that we want to build for
Yeah.
interstellar travel and hell, just scooting around the Earth.
Yeah.
We have to, we have to accommodate for the breaking of the Earth's atmosphere and getting it
Yeah.
up there into orbit and all the rest of that stuff. If we can have facilities built up there and vehicles built up there, we could do interstellar space vehicles that don't require the same kinds of fuel or anything like that. It's such a cool thing, like the way ion drives work and like solar sails and things of that nature.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
it's
well
just such a
the
cool piece of
EM
tech.
drives, EM drives. I love reading about EM drives. Those are awesome.
Yeah. And then we've got access to the kinds of communication that could bring near time even like pretty dang far, like multi planets away, near real time communication back and
Yeah.
forth for voice, video, and data. It's a really, really neat opportunity. I'm curious to see where we are in like 10 or 15 years with space travel. Because private enterprise is absolutely driving innovation
Yeah.
so much faster than government is.
Yeah.
We'll see how that works.
Well, I'm gonna jump to one last subject here, gaming. So I am looking forward to Diablo 4. That comes out in 10 days, 12 days. I don't know. It comes about 2
Yeah.
weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to it. I logged onto my account to play with some buddies, and I have between 4 characters. I have 160 hours in it.
Wow.
I didn't
My
even.
only concern with Diablo 4 is the same thing they did to Diablo Immortal, and they're gonna microtransaction the bejesus out of it.
Oh,
and
see, I
really
didn't know they did any of that.
frack
I
the
just,
game.
I only played each round a couple of times, and then I got bored and went to something else. But it's so funny. All right, I was talking with Nick, and we were talking about Diablo 3, and he was actually reading a article. Basically, what happened was Path of the Exile came out, and they were gonna release Diablo 4. And everyone said, "Oh my God, Path of the Exile is exactly what we wanted in there." And basically, all the developers and everybody for Diablo 4 is like, "Oh crap!" They're like, "Yeah, we wish that was in Diablo." So they basically pushed the game and reworked a lot of it. Where a lot of the people playing in beta saying, "This is the Diablo that we wanted from the beginning." So they're saying
Yeah.
they actually are enjoying it quite a bit.
Yeah, I know that Dojo has really enjoyed it, and some other friends of mine
Yeah.
have really enjoyed playing the beta testing. I'm looking forward to it with cautious optimism. Like when
Yeah.
they announced Diablo Immortal, this was like what last year,
Something
as a
like that.
cell phone
Yeah.
game with like ridiculous
Oh my gosh!
microtransactions,
Yeah.
and it came out like if you wanted to get the full experience of the game, you spent like roughly $80,000 to complete, and I'm
Yeah.
like, that's that on a mobile game, on a freaking cell phone game.
Yeah.
80, no, thank you. And so I'm taking the Diablo 4 announcement and launch very cautiously. If it
Okay.
reminds me of the Diablo of old, I'm in it to win it because I love Path of Exile. I've got several hundred hours in it.
Wow.
Actually, probably closer to 1,000. I've played most of the seasons, and I really, really enjoy that kind of
Yeah.
game. And there's a hole in the marketplace for a quality ARPG that isn't like Genshin Impact or something, or
You think
Black Desert Online or something like that.
you think our games will ever get back to kind of non-transactional type stuff where you're not grinding or transacting like even Gears 5 went to open
Yeah.
world. Hey, Halo bombed, because it went to open world. That's my theory.
Well, it didn't have. They built it. Open world done well is great. Look at Red Dead Redemption. Look at
Well,
The Witcher
yeah,
3. Honestly,
but
Cyberpunk post patches is
yeah,
really really
but
cool. And it's a
but
neat
when you
experience. But
look
there's no
at,
content in
well,
Halo, and it was
there's a
fun.
story, but it's so random. Hey, save this dude over here, dude. I like set about 3/4 of the way through of Gears 5. I just sat down. I'm like, I want Gears 5 back. I
Well,
didn't.
and you have to play two different campaigns to finish the game, and the second
Yeah,
campaign is really short and really sucks.
yeah, and I sit there and I just go, like, I played Halo to run through a level. I played Gears to run through a level. That was half the fun of it. When you get to the next level of the campaign, it's a campaign. It's not a, I'm gonna run
Mhm.
over here. I'm gonna get 6 keys, and then I'm gonna do this. And I'm like, God, just please go back to the original. But obviously, it's
Well,
343
Halo
Studios.
is a ton of fetch quests. Go get this thing. Go talk to
Yes.
this dude. Go do this.
Or
The dialogue is boring. It's too far
okay,
apart from the action. Not enough enemies.
super nerdy, random thing on the way that I look at it, and you're gonna laugh. Halo, the new Halo Infinite reminds me of the airplanes in Street Fighter when it goes woo, and you have to go to this corner of the map.
Oh God.
Right.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I can kind of see that. I mean, but at
Yeah.
least those levels were, consistent. Halo is a very inconsistent experience
It is.
and
It's so weird.
really
Like
inconsistent.
I was able to go fight a main boss like immediately. I'm like, well, and I ran into it by accident. I'm like, I
Yeah.
killed them all. I went through there, and I mean, yeah, all of them, but it was, I don't know. I want story. I really want a,
So,
or I don't want like a, don't get, I don't want a Final Fantasy where I'm watching a movie.
yeah.
But when you look at a lot of the indie games and a lot of stuff coming out that did really well, like the new Resident Evils, those were really fun to play. Those
Hmm.
were a blast to go through. Gosh, or Last of
But
Us.
even like Elden Ring is a game that
Elden Ring, I had a blast. It's open world,
I
but
it is, but it's still a Souls game, and
oh,
you
of
know it's a
course,
Souls game,
yeah,
and it beats you down. You can beat it
yeah,
in 20 or 30
yeah,
minutes. To finish it takes significantly longer.
yeah.
We had the new the Jedi game that just came out
Which
a
is
month ago.
completely separate from the Knights of the Old Republic online
Yeah.
MMORPG or
Yeah.
MMO, yeah, whatever.
And
Which
it's a decent game. It's kind of finicky on PC,
yeah.
and its performance is not great.
Well,
Then I
well,
look at
or
what were you
Borderlands.
gonna
I loved
Borderlands is
Borderlands.
great. It's a
Yeah,
good example of a shooter that's open worldish, that has a story, that has a consistent set of goals
yeah,
you want to do. But that's the thing that Gearbox is kind of known for, at least they used to be known for,
yeah,
is games with an intense desire to complete them and
yeah,
things that made it worth doing. And not just chasing some other random cosmetic or pink
yeah,
shiny thing. Although to be fair, some of those quests are like that.
yeah,
But it's still a fun game with good dialogue. It's engaging. It keeps you involved in it.
yeah,
And gaming has kind of lost that. Some of that too is because you have very few large studios making games, and they don't want to take any risks.
yeah.
If one thing worked, everyone does the one thing.
You mean
And since
GTA
it's
5
taken,
for 10 years or whatever it ran?
yeah,
They
I
said,
mean, it still runs. So I guess now it's just GTA Online, but yeah,
well, did you see
it works.
GTA 6? How much money they put into it to develop
Oh
it?
yeah, and then it got leaked like 6 months ago or 4 months
Let's see.
ago,
Hold on.
which is
Yeah, how
crazy.
much it was? It was $1 billion they put into developing GTA 6. A billion with a B.
Yep.
Like
But
just
by that same token, Rockstar is known for games that run along. Again, another company though, kind of
yep.
like like Gearbox, they're known for
Yeah.
a very long runway on their games. GTA has run in dozens of iterations
Yeah.
from the core game. It's on every platform, and they have made like small countries worth of money on it, and they're still making that much money on it. And I think actually I saw something that the GTA 6 budget was actually 2 billion as of a
Ooh.
couple of months ago,
Wow.
but Rockstar is making like 6 billion a year off of
Yeah.
the current GTA properties that are available right now.
Yeah.
So they don't really care how much it's going to
You know
cost.
who I
It's
think
going
did
to
it?
run for a decade
You
too.
know who
So
I
there's
think
that.
I did it? I think they did it right as far as making money. Not necessarily games go. Is Epic.
Yeah.
I mean, they just like Epic just did it.
Fortnite still prints money.
Oh yeah.
It is, and now that they have creator mode and the kind of games that they brought
Well,
into
well, it's
creator
funny
mode, and like
because I don't even think that's a majority of their revenue. A majority of their revenue is everyone using the Unreal Engine.
Fortnite is like a
Is it?
massive
Okay,
percentage of
I'll have to take a look at that. But like the
35
Unreal,
or 40% of their
yeah,
income. It is
the Unreal,
it is
yeah,
obscene.
obscene amount of money. But any case, I'm gonna move on to this last subject here.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I like to do is, all right, as we get bigger and as people tend to submit to us, and some questions that already people ask us is, do we have advice for people getting into tech, other things like that, or what should we be worried about? What shouldn't be we worried about? Like AI, obviously, is the biggest worry right now. Should you be worried?
I don't think you should be worried about AI necessarily unless you're already doing a job that's outdated or outmoded. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
I think if you're worried about something, you should learn it. If you're in the tech industry right now and you are not focusing on emerging tech, on AI,
Yeah.
on all the crypto garbage that's rolling out there, it's just some things to stay away from when it comes to that space. If you're not paying attention to that, you're not looking into it aggressively, you're gonna
Sure.
find yourself out of a job. Look at all of those Twitter and Facebook or Meta employees are now out of a job. 25,000 new technicians. High level, like six-figure IT people are out of their jobs, but the ones that kept their jobs are the developers, the infrastructure people, the designers, and the engineers. All the
Engineers.
frontline workers got outmoded by things that one, they were a lot of them was just tech bloat, but also they got
Un,
outmoded by
un,
automation. They got outmoded by AI tools that should have been
Unpopular
doing the same
opinion.
thing
I have an unpopular opinion. Working managers. Sorry. You got to be
Yeah.
a working manager, and you got to be able to
hmm
know how to code and do the stuff. Like I get it if you are phenomenal at it, but you got to be a working manager these days. There's just no way around it.
Or at the very least, a knowledgeable manager. The
Yes.
era of stupid, incompetent people managing teams of smart, competent people is over. I saw a study on LinkedIn a couple of days ago that 30% of all white collar jobs will be gone by this time next year. And the
Wow.
reality is those jobs that they're talking about are managers of teams they have no business managing, that they don't have any knowledge or any real investment in the stack that they're managing or the employees that they're managing. And I think they're probably right. I don't think it's because of AI. I think it's because the workforce has had to get smarter and leaner because technology has shown
Yeah.
us the places where the humans are deficient in things for no other reason than lazy complacence. And I realize this is hard to hear, but it's true. I've been through every turn down in this industry since 1998. And almost every time people blame it on something it isn't. It's almost always we got lazy, we got secure, we stopped having to pay attention, we stopped having to learn. We thought the gravy train was never going to be over.
Yeah.
Now tech makes the gravy train about as fast as the news cycle. It's over if you're not paying attention. It's over damn
Well,
fast.
and I'm gonna have a counterpoint to that. I'm gonna have two counterpoints. One, I'm gonna have a positive note on people kind of scared with jobs and everything else. Well, I'm gonna jump to that one first. One, the positive note is I try to tell people is, so the negative side is Series C funding is down. There's just
hmm
not money being pumped into pretty much any Series C's funding. I mean, there is, but most of the tech.
It's so much lower.
But your C Series A funding skyrocketing right now
hmm
because of Chat GPT, because of OpenAI, because what it's done is it's made developers go from 25 team sizes down to 4.
hmm
You just don't need it anymore, and they're getting, and so there's so many incubators right now over specifically in Silicon Valley, and Dallas, San Antonio, Chicago, and a bunch of them, yeah,
Austin.
Boston. And what they're doing is they're paying them 25 grand to get all the LLC, everything set up. They ship them over. If they like what it is, they'll dump 100 grand into it or 75 grand into it to get it
hmm
going with 4 guys in a couple of months, because you can go, yeah, ChatGPT AI is never going to give you your full code or whatever the case is. As much as the news article came, do you see, Microsoft's new thing about not needing to know any code to build a website? We have Squarespace ready. Let's be fair. We have Wix.
I
Who
mean,
gives a shit?
we've had that stuff for 20 years. The WYSIWYG editor's
But
been around forever.
But when I tell people though, I'm like, it's an opportunity for you. If you are inclined engineering, whatever the case is, doesn't matter who you are, what color you are, whatever you are. If you're a smart person with drive, you could go with a couple of people and solve a problem. We're in the wild, wild
Mhm.
west of the gold rush right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can build
There, you,
you can build a generative AI off of Open AI with a couple of guys and get it sold.
mhm.
So
Yeah, we really are. The gold rush part is pretty apt because
yeah,
3 years ago you still needed people to write a lot of custom code. These days, everything is some kind of library, and the
yeah,
accessibility of information of quality
yeah.
building blocks is so much better than it has been in the last several years. And you're right,
It,
four dudes can do what 30 used to
yeah.
do,
Well, and it makes
and
me
we do that in our
jealous.
own projects.
And it's so funny because it makes you and I come from a generation of we had to pick up a book, read the manual, and get in going. We
Hmm.
have Reddit, YouTube, we have
Stack
Stack
Overflow.
Overflow. We have Discord where you can go into a Discord. Like we have our own Discord. If you want to come on in our Discord and ask our senior developers and engineers questions, you can do that. We never had that. We had to basically beat ourselves up against the wall and try to figure that stuff out. So this is a great opportunity for people to go. And the second counterpoint, I would say, yeah, there are lazy people definitely out there. I know we're going to get some hate for that. Tough luck. But it has been proven, though, at the same time, they say this next generation is the smartest generation to ever have lived.
Yeah, because they have access to all of our failures
Yeah.
on the internet because the
Yeah.
internet is permanent.
Yeah.
And they have access to so much better learning tools. And I don't just mean like the content that's available. The
Mm-hmm.
way we teach programming, development, engineering now is so
Yeah.
different than we used to teach it.
Yeah.
And the kids these days are going to come up with the next truly amazing, innovative stuff. I mean, and it's not just AI. AI is just a tiny amount of what they're going to be able to accomplish with the tools
Yeah.
that they have. And I'm super excited for it. Every time we have a drawdown in an industry, another industry comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And the employees that we have lost and we will lose in the industry, they're going to move to other fields or other
Yeah.
industries and they'll bolster them.
Yeah.
There's always going to be enough work in a Western society for people to do if they decide they
Mm.
want to do it. And I am definitely excited for where that goes.
Yeah, I am too, and I think there's great opportunity. There's great everything else. My last piece of advice before we jump off is, dear God, if you ask ChatGPT to write you something and it puts out code in ChatGPT 4 and please have your senior engineer look at it. Don't just paste that into there. We actually were talking about this earlier today. We were talking about, man, how malicious would it be for us to build some malicious code, have Google scan it like crazy, and basically when it goes to search for it, it finds your code with your exploited DLL to be able to say, hey, copy this, and then you copy that into your Linux machine, and all of a sudden it automatically downloads through the package manager your exploited DLL
I
code.
mean, that's the problem with how we teach them is
Yeah.
there's an opportunity for bad actors to
Yep.
absolutely wreak freaking havoc on the way they work now. And also, don't use ChatGPT for your resume. Don't use it to answer technical questions for job interviews, because
Yeah.
the hiring managers that have a brain go, "This is never going to work," and they use some form of generative tool.
I was
Because
gonna
this
say there's
subject
more of them
doesn't
now.
pay attention
A
to it.
lot of the ones that don't know the tech co, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, yeah, just be careful what you copy and paste, man. Just like Stack Overflow, don't put somebody else's notes in there. At least take those out.
The amount of audits that we have done on like other companies' source code and found exact comments and exact, snippets of code from like Stack Overflow or Reddit
Yeah.
that are not edited. Please just use it as an example. If the answer
Yeah.
is right, still make your variables, make it custom to what you're doing.
Yeah.
God, please just don't just use Stack Overflow directly.
Yeah.
It's a great tool if it's used right.
Yeah.
It's no different than using Wolfram Alpha to solve your problems. Learn how to do it. Use that as an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. That's Yeah, that's our piece of advice. Well, we thank you guys for listening here. It's a good day. If you guys have any questions, post it in the comments. We'll see if we can get to it and go through these things. And as we kind of get rolling, we'll maybe try to, and as we get a little better at this, we'll do some live session recordings to get this going, get it pushed over to YouTube and everything else. And I'm kind of liking BSIT podcast, right? It's BSIT.
For Blacksmith.
Podcast, yeah, for Blacksmith. So we'd like to thank you guys. We're with Blacksmith Integrations, Blacksmith Integrations or Blacksmith IT, and come on around again and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Later, guys.